Um, we thought that we would start readings with the people who didn't come in November, which is Cynthia, Mary McCarthy, and Mary Ellen Talley, and then move to the people who were here in November but got cut off and didn't get to read to the whole group. Um, and for
Yeah.
those, I have Rosemary, Shoshana, Lorraine, who's still not here, I think, right? And Mary Ann. And then we'll go to the rest of us who did get. So, is there anybody else who didn't get to read or wasn't here last time who I didn't say?
Ethan, were you in that group who didn't get to read last month?
I got to read.
Oh, you
I
did.
did read last time, yeah.
Yeah, I have.
I got to read the first half and then I misinterpreted the time for the second part and didn't get to that. So
Okay, so we'll put you up there, Allery, with the second group.
yeah.
Is there a time that this is supposed to be finished, or how long the Zoom works, or?
I have a paid subscription, so we can go as long as we want, but I think we put 7 to 8:30 on the announcement. I think that's reasonable to quit certainly by 8:30. Is that good with Eastern time? I don't know where everybody is. So, okay. And then when you read, if you want to tell us just briefly where you're reading from, that would be cool. And we'll hopefully don't read your longest poem, so we get around to everybody. So Cynthia, you want to kick us off?
Okay, can you hear me all right? Great. I was in a Zoom meeting the other day and I couldn't be heard, so I don't know what happened. Anyway, I'm in Yucca Valley, California, which is a high desert near Joshua Tree National Park. So like Sharon, I'm a desert dweller, and a lot of my poems have to do with the desert, but I thought I would read one that Sharon published on her Storyteller blog back in the summer. This is one of my favorite storytelling poems, and it's about a woman named Annie Edson Taylor, who was the first woman to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. And so I wrote a poem about her life. Her nickname was Queen of the Mist, and that's the title of the poem. So, Queen of the Mist. A Civil War widow at 25, her infant son dead, Annie Edson Taylor faced the rest of her life with gusto. She crossed the continent 8 times, became a dance instructor, took off with a friend for Mexico. The details can only be imagined, as she was a good Episcopalian and confessed no sins. Thank God, a substantial inheritance bridged the gap between expenses and income. She spared no cost at any juncture, and so, near her 63rd birthday, found herself penniless, lodged in a boarding house, relying on the charity of relatives who begrudged every dime. Then Kismet struck like a 200-pound anvil. Why not be the first to ride Niagara Falls in a barrel? Of course, she would survive, make a fortune on autographs and memorabilia, travel the world again, heave ho. Full of bravado, she hired a promoter, had the best barrel made, and did it. Though the physical shock shook her to the core. Nobody ought ever to do that again, she claimed. In a photo of her sitting alone at a table, waiting for adoring hordes to shower her with gold, she looks grim. Her manager stole her barrel. She spent 20 more years a pauper before meeting her maker. If not for her desperate act, she would be entirely forgotten. Just another woman who ran out of options. who was willing to die if she could not live in the style to which she was accustomed. Thank you.
So
If you
fun. I
look
can't
up-
believe that her manager stole the barrel.
I know, it's so sad. If you look online, if you Google her, you can see photos of her and so on and so forth. It's an interesting story.
You know,
Yes, it really
there's
is.
a boat that takes people on tours, and I'm pretty sure the name is Queen of the Mists.
Yes, I think you're right about that, right.
It's
Oh,
called
okay.
Made of the Mists. It's
Made of
Made
the
of the Mists.
Ah, Maid of the
Mist.
Mist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Mary McCarthy?
Okay, hi. In Edgewater, Florida. Wish I was not in Florida these days, but this is from my new book, How to Become Invisible, that tells the story of my journey through journey with mental illness, particularly bipolar disorder. And this poem comes out of experiencing ECT. Strangers so unkind. Lined up on gurneys by the elevator, we wait to be taken downstairs where they'll start IVs and gel our temples and strap the rubber and metal crowns to our heads without once looking any one of us in the eye. Then comes the whiff of plastic and oxygen as the mask comes down and darkness rises, covering you like a lover with a dark surprise in his pocket. You awake with a raging headache and no memory of anything much, floating through the days without leaving a trace you could point to and say, "This is mine." You have lost your right to time. Maybe someday you'll remember this and it won't be a nightmare, but I wouldn't bet on it. Thank you.
Wow, it's pretty intense. Mary, thank you. Mary Ellen.
Okay. Hello. I'm here from Seattle, but this is a poem about being in Texas recently in April. And this is my forthcoming book from Kelsey Press, Taking Leave. It's about my sister. It's a long title. 1 billion years ago, magma cooled, and here I stand on enchanted rock in Texas after I visit my sister, whose diagnosis is dire. I salute this monolithic dome, this vast rising hill of bedrock, roseate granite that stretches out acres while my sister rests. I salute my chilled ears and fears buffeted by a vista of cold wind under afternoon sun. This dryscape that allows tread of my soles to tether me to this spread of boulders, my legs that climb, my knees that check me from running downhill as I loved to do in my youth. I salute potassium feldspar that makes granite pink, and gnarly green live oak with roots riveted into rock atop this sparse terrain where vernal pools of rain host fairy shrimp, not far from prickly pear cacti and blossoms of purple spiderwort. My own life seems multicolored twists and turns as if I am the nearby mesquite tree. I would offer my wood to become hard sealed flooring in the Cowboy Art Museum I visit while my sister's body declines. I salute her oxygen tether and the ibuprofen that I swallow before each hike. Oh, the raindrops on my face, They dry before the giant slabs turn slippery. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Ellen. What details in that poem. I love the internal rhyme too. That was really nice. Okay, is there anybody else who didn't get a chance to read at all the last time we were here? Yeah, Rosemary, we have you on the yeah. Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. I'm going to read from my new book, which is called Life Stuff, and has just been published by Kelsey this November. And I was going to read the first poem in my list of the few I chose, which is more confessional. But because we are storytellers, I thought I'd choose another one. And that's a memory of my teenage times. It's called Foxtrot. Giggles behind clammy hands, starched skirt, 5 petticoats. Only this morning, they, on the other side of the hall, wore short pants and dirty faces. Yesterday, I beat them at math, apart from the volleyball that nearly killed Werner. We were worried, but had to giggle. He was such a prat. Today, they are stiff in their Sunday best, and with their awkward stance, they've become ETs. Some are still drifting. The teacher is at her thrill, most schoolmistress best. Boys to the right, girls to the left, choose your partners. Foxtrot, please, band. That's it.
Thank you. That was really great. Let's see. Next we have Shoshana.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all. Um, it seems like we're on kind of a serious bent tonight. So anyway, I'll add to that. I live in Madison, Wisconsin, and in 2012, there was a middle-aged man found in his home who had, sadly enough, taken his own life, and it had been 4 years since it had happened, and he had not been missed. There are various reasons why his suicide went unnoticed, but the poem is, I'm just giving you the background because there is an epigraph, but anyway, the title is In Touch. Village gossip got passed on without leaving the kitchen sink once Alexander brought the telephone to 50,000 homes. And maybe nobody noticed the cobwebs on the doorbell, the porch swing at a standstill, the lemonade pitcher on its platter collecting a coat of dust. Maybe they only marveled at the privilege of privacy, a cross-county chat while lounging in bathrobes. Garages replaced sidewalks on Daisy Lane. Chalk and jump ropes languishing on toy store shelves. As televisions and Chevrolets mushroomed block to block. And maybe no one mourned the dearth of dinner conversation or missed the accordion's Spanish to basement mold. A middle-aged man wrote a note to his estranged daughter, leaned it against the salt shaker, held a gun, pulled the trigger. David Carter did not know he would lie undiscovered for the next 4 years, while friends and family did Facebook, hit reply all, tweeted.
Wow, that does seem to fit with the general tenor here. It's quite 4 years, man. Okay, Marianne?
Yes, here I am. Hard to decide what to read. 'Cause all these poems are hard acts to follow. I want to show my book, but this is not such a new book, but it's new to me. Why We Never Visited the Elms. I think maybe I'll read the first. Poem. And it's about my mother's stories about her college days. We heard a lot about her college days, but we never actually visited the campus of Our Lady of the Elms in Chicopee, Massachusetts. Here we go. Why We Never Tried to Find the Elms. Empty tobacco barns stood in fields beside the highway in mild light that seemed dim after summer out west. In the car, my mother was telling stories about her college, Our Lady of the Elms, just a few miles north and west of here. I knew her stories well. Still, all these years, we had never tried to find the elms. She had said it was tucked into a neighborhood with watered lawns and oak trees, with spruce houses, stained glass. It must have been so gracious to a girl who grew up behind Peter's garage and walked beneath the tracks each day uphill to St. Bernard's. I knew. I had walked with Graham to church through the tunnel stench. In college, Mom said she was happy to sleep on a cot in a room full of girls, to take classes on Saturday, to pretend to eat lukewarm mackerel every Friday, while the dean of discipline swept through the wartime dining hall. By 1987, the row of cots were long gone. The few nuns left wore pantsuits. With students, they laughed over lunch. Every Friday, the cafeteria would serve slices of greasy Hamburg pizza that Mom would have pretended to eat had we stopped by her old school. Thank you. And I'm in Rockville, Maryland. So is my husband. And but I'm originally from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Marianne. Those college memories. Okay, Allery.
Okay, I have lived over half my life in Kansas City, Missouri now, but it doesn't feel like home to me. I love it for its arts community, especially the writer's place, but home is really Virginia and North Carolina, and I miss the beaches terribly. Even though it's probably pretty obvious, I'm not one to tan, so just stay out of the sun and go dip my feet in the water when dark's approaching. Some years back, well, this would have been in the early, before 2020, probably 2004, 2005, we saw an exhibit of Gee's Bend's quilts in Atlanta, and a year later I wrote this poem. The Quilters of Gee's Bend. Seems like that old river tied itself in a knot just to keep Black folks there at Gee's Bend, while time and fortune swept on by. And Master Petway gave those folks his name, but stripped everything else he could. Left just scraps, but they were used to that. So those hands that hardly needed something else to do unraveled their worn-out world, pieced together remnants of Africa and raggedy dreams to make something new. Let dress tails dance with breeches, heat from the cotton fields pressed deep in their seams. So tired of plowed furrows, they let those stitches bend now and then, just like that river. Nothing perfect, yet God was in the details. And the quilters called that making do, and visiting, and keeping warm, and pulling up memories each night, till one day they were told, we call that art. Thank you.
Valerie, what a nice ending. Let's see. So now we're down to the people who did read last time. And I just have a list here. I'm just going to go in the order we got it. Jacqueline Jules.
Thank you, Joanne, for hosting us tonight. I'm going to read a poem. I'm from Long Island, New York. I live in Long Island, New York. I'm originally from Virginia. I'm going to read a poem from my book, Stronger Than Cleopatra. And it's called Birthday Gifts. Excuse me. Birthday Gifts. A man who reads a woman's mind is a greeting card fantasy invented by someone who lives alone. Only single people don't quarrel over who took out the trash last, who left the lights on, who didn't put the ketchup in the fridge. Small clashes coat cohabitation like grease on a fry pan. Too often, we forgot to watch the stove and black smoke covered the walls. If I wanted carrot cake, not chocolate, a bracelet, not a blender, I could have told you before my birthday arrived. Now, when your life has been etched on a stone with 2 dates, it's too late to say, I should have opened more of your gifts with delight. Thank you.
Well, quite a metaphor, Jackie. Joe Cottonwood.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. I just been making up my mind which one to read, and I settled on this one. It's called The Car Cure. It's about my dog. Blended with the floorboards, so we named him Oak. Stood like a sawhorse, blocking a child from the street as if to say, I will not let you die. A predator, ate teddy bears. More than anything, loved to ride in our car. Stumbled one day, groaning to the yard, collapsed on a bed of blooming lilies. In the house, Rose discovered he'd eaten most of a braided hearth rug, like swallowing a rope of rags. Why? Would not explain, would not budge, would not open his eyes in that garden, not for love nor bacon. Insides aflame, between gurgle and sigh, waiting to die. Rose would not let him. Home alone, she could not lift 80 pounds of yellow lab, but in stroke of genius, drove the car across flowers right up to Oak, and she opened the door. He cocked the blonde eyebrow, slowly, in agony, raised himself, clumsily with a push on his behind, climbed into the vintage VW, wedged his head out the window. Sunday, tiny town, no vet. Rose drove for miles. Doggy head lifted, neck stretched. Nose inhaled fresh, rolling scent of pastures green, of dirt road dust. He panted with dangled tongue, with ancient lust. Do you sometimes drive, simply drive, top open or windows down, casting your demons to the breeze? Rose drove home. Oak stepped out, shook himself as if shedding water or madness, and without thought of past or future, trotted peaceably into the house. That's it.
A wonderful performance too, Joe, as well as the poem.
Thank you.
Gary. Gary there? Gary, you're muted. Are you getting in? Maybe he had to step away for a minute. We could come back to him. Jim.
All right. I'm definitely going to lighten the mood with a poem called Wallowing in the Obvious. Are you reading that paper, he asks, indicating the one I'm sitting on. Yes, I answer without smiling, as I stand, turn the page, sit back down. Oh, are you here? She blurts out on entering the room I currently occupy. No, I say ruefully, I am still only a figment of your adolescent desire. Did you take this picture? He wonders aloud, ignoring the copyright signature in the corner. Actually, it took me, is my reply, and I am taken by it again and again. You wrote these poems? She queries, looking at the author photo on the book, then up at me. I've been waiting for this one. Not really, I say. Everyone knows the poems write themselves. Do you love me? My wife asks. I'm still here, I answer, smiling. I'm still here.
Thanks for changing the mood a little, Jim. It's nice. I think, Gary, are you back? There you are. You're muted, but
Sorry, I had to step away for a minute.
no worries. We came back to you.
So this is a brand new poem. Oh, and I have a brand new book. So this was just published by Inspired Press. And it's available on Amazon. That's how they distribute. So this is a brand new poem, not in the book. This is titled Anthocyanin and Carotene. Technically, they're named for how they fall. Red oak and maple, yellow poplar, obvious, no? But red doesn't explicate hues beginning as pinkish green chroma, then metamorphosing into the color and scent of a 95 Diamond Hill Cabernet. While on the topic of wine, the gingered leaves of elms must be savored, like a glass of 32-year-old Chateau d'Yquem. But this really isn't about la vie bourgeoisie moderne, though brie and sushi bloom on the shelves of mini-marts everywhere, and Brother Is sings rainbows and wonderfuls from every streaming platform. No way. It's about faceted ruby leaves now crumpling and tumbling into wrinkled dark copper, and the fact that I simply want to say, once again, I love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Let's see, Lori.
Hey, hi, everyone. Nice to see everyone. The title of my new book is called That Infinite Raw, ROAR. My Brooklyn accent gets in the way, but I am, for better or worse, reading from Florida. Like Mary said, sometimes it's hard to be here, but I'm in South Florida. And so the poem I'm going to read, the title of my book comes from the poem I'm going to read, which is called First Banana, and it's for my son who is going to be 36 pretty soon. First Banana. When all waxing ounces of your premature weight reached 5 pounds, you were allowed first solids. We fed you a banana, and you growled like an animal in waiting. The mushy pulp around your feathered mouth, muscles barely ready to chew, swallowed the mashed fruity slime. After tubes of formula, pumped breast milk, and colicky evenings, you swallowed a sweetness that there were no words for, just a growl, that first joy, that infinite roar.
Oh, yes, those moments. Kavita. There she is, Kavita.
Oh. Hi, everyone. I'm from Calgary, Canada. And since we're on a storyteller session, I thought I'd tell the story of the origins of my Jewish community, Indian Jewish community, that according to legend, we arrived on a shipwreck. Nobody knows what we were fleeing or whether it was persecution or something else, but we arrived on the Konkan coast of India. So I'm going to read my poem from my book, Light of the Sabbath, and it's called Shipwreck. It starts with a quotation. The wise man built his house upon a rock, based upon the legend of the origins of the Ben Israel Indian Jewish community in India. Shipwreck. The ship struck a rock. The ship broke. God's rock stood firm. It carried my people to a new land, a different destiny. Someday, a foundation stone for a museum will be laid in commemoration, testament to the broken arrival of a band of lifeless strangers, a rock-solid memory. The local villagers built pyres, set the bodies on the wood, a final farewell to the seeming dead to be consumed by flames. There were stirrings on the funeral pyre. A quick return to life followed. Light-skinned and curly-haired, their prayers in their own language were different. Their faith, like all people who put their trust in God. Settling in nearby villages, blending into the landscape, they pressed the oil, became oil pressers of the local seed. Saturday oil pressers, Shanwar Telis, they were called, my ancestors. Built homes, married, had children, multiplied like the grains of sand as promised to Abraham. I am from the same seed, descendant of those shipwrecked wanderers. God's rock recurs in dreams. My ship breaks ever so often on life's rocks, but I survive, like my ancestors, pressing seeds into verse to preserve a story of survival, not just on Saturdays. Thank you.
So interesting, Kavita. Thank you. Let's see, Ethan.
Oh, hi. Okay. Yeah, I have too many cat poems, so this is more like prose poem, maybe. It's from my book Dreamscapes, which has been out about 2 years now, I think. But it's eventually going to be featured on Sharon's page, but I think it'll be a bit of a wait. Okay. This is about our cat, Thelma. It's called Transmigration. One day, Thelma came to us in the form of a dog, a smallish mutt of indeterminate color, although perhaps still a tabby. She bounded around as we patted her, then leapt up and curled on the couch to sleep. Most days, Thelma did choose to remain a cat, but one day she scurried about as a worried-looking rabbit. Another time, she was a sloth hanging from our ceiling fan, and once a lion cub, which was scary. How would we handle her if she grew to a full 1,000-pound beast? When Thelma took the form of a deer, she bounded about the house in a panic, knocking over our kitchen table and breaking several dishes. Don't ever do that again, I told her sternly, once she had returned to cat form. What if she appears as a mythological creature? Marianne asked with a worried look. If she starts breathing fire, she could really do some damage. Maybe we need better insurance. Don't be ridiculous, I said. Dragons and whatnot don't even exist. You've got to start living in the real world. I was more worried that Thelma would take the form of an insect and we would accidentally step on her. Then that would be the end of our wonderful cat. Okay, thank you.
Lovely fantasy ride there. Thank you. I guess for to me. Is there anybody except me and Sharon and I who haven't read yet? Okay. Do you want to go before me, Sharon? You want me to go ahead?
I'm not going to read.
Oh, okay. All righty. Sorry.
I'm not going to read.
Okay. Gotcha. So I think I'll read a poem from my chapbook on shifting shoals. I don't know if you can see it in the when I have a background, but it's a book about I live on the North Carolina coast right outside of Wilmington. And the book is about that, about all the different sorts of things that happen among the people and the environment and everything else. And this is actually where the title comes from. The Hunt. Walking along the shoreline in January's cold clarity, my friend Sandy spies a shark tooth, coveted treasure of every beachcomber. Its smooth shine catches her practiced eye. She gives it to me, a novice at these things, though my students and I have read plenty about sharks, how they occasionally mistake a wave-riding human for a creature of the sea, while we stalk and slaughter millions of them, cut prized fins from live bodies, toss butchered remains into bloodied waves. I tell her how 8-year-old Elmer cried, "That's not fair. No wonder they attack us." Sandy thanks me for this shard of child sense that hunts for justice through shifting shoals. She tucks his words into her mind's pocket as I roll the hard edge of my fossil between the warm fingers of my gloves. Thank you. So I think everybody has had a chance to read. So we were thinking that maybe folks would like to just chat a bit and maybe share some of the things that you're working on or things that you're thinking about your poems or anything you'd like to share with us about your work. Anybody want to kick us off?
Could I thank Sharon for starting this group? I love the idea of a storytelling group because it seems to be kind of frowned upon by a lot of poetry editors, and I think they're missing the boat. So it's good to gather with you all and share our fondness for this brand of poetry.
I completely agree. I write narrative. That's the reason that I write is to tell a story. And I never have been, okay, I've been mildly successful because Sharon just published a short story of mine. But in general, I don't write prose. I write poetry, but I'm always telling a story. So I absolutely love this.
I'll endorse that because I love writing narrative poetry, and it also preserves family history and everything else that's going on, which might be lost if one didn't write narrative poetry. But you're right that a lot of editors find narrative poetry pretty difficult to publish. So I also want to thank Sharon for encouraging us to pursue this genre. I'll call it a genre.
What do you guys think about in terms of when when you're writing a narrative poem, I mean, the accusation that comes with narrative poetry is always just pose in lines, you know? And so what do you think about in terms of, I mean, I think all of us don't feel that that's what it is, but what do you feel makes the difference between prose in lines and a good narrative poem?
Well, a friend of mine, a poet and a very good poet, said he was a teacher of poetry. And he said, look, guys, anybody who cuts the lines and says this is a poem will have a poem. It is a poem. Now we can discuss whether it's a good poem or not.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
I have a thought about this in terms of the story itself. If it's told, and I mean, a story can be told in such a way that it's a metaphor. I mean, think about how for centuries, since the beginning of time, we've been telling stories to children as a way of teaching them morals, teaching them values. And so a story is inherently has a metaphor. And if it's told in a poem in such a way where that metaphor is highlighted, then the story itself is figurative language.
Well, I find myself getting, as I get older now, I have slipped in the last couple of years into storytelling or poems that are narrative poems. And I started off with other things. I suppose I always told a story in a way. What I don't like is poets' word poems that simply don't say anything. There's a word for it, which I won't use here now because my mother told me not to. But as I get older, I look back and I would like to tell the story of those moments that I remember.
Yeah.
Because it's never remembered as a memoir. It's never remembered in one stretch. What you get are impressions. It's one memory here and another memory there. And I would like to actually record those. And so I'm tempted to, my new book is full of narrative poetry, even though there are some just confessional ones. But on the whole, it's narrative poetry. And I'm unashamedly now a mostly narrative poet.
Oh, yeah, I just want to bring up that there's a long history of literature that has evolved, but like the old epics were stories and poetry, right?
Yeah.
They needed that to hold it, you know, because they weren't written down, they were sung. But even a lot, like hopping forward to the Romantics, like there's lots of stories like Coleridge, the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, right? So I don't really get why like modern poetry isn't supposed to be narrative, but I think you know, there's narrative, but there's all sorts of other stuff that's poetic going on at the same time, right? I mean, you can have whatever balance you want to create the effect and the impact that you want, whatever you call it, whether you call it a poem or a story or both.
I think it's hard to not tell stories.
Yes, exactly.
Even metaphors are like a condensed story. There's a story in there, a story of fun. And storytelling to me is the basic human thing. What do? We tell stories to ourselves and each other. And I find it hard to not tell a story every time I write. There's always a story in it.
I think a narrative poem, I find myself at this stage in my writing career of wanting to incorporate a lot more lyricism in my work. I feel like I am a storyteller by nature, so the conflict for me then is how to make that story either via metaphor or by a kind of like taking a side path and then coming back to the main path, how to make it more interesting for me. I really like narrative poems. Well, like the poem I read. Okay, so it starts out and you probably thought, oh, he's going to be talking about leaves and it's fall. And, you know, then I start talking about wine all of a sudden. And then I'm talking about how everything is bourgeois. So to me, a really good narrative poem, at least the narrative poems that I want to write, are ones that have these turns that take them out of a linear, I guess what I'm trying to say, takes them out of a linear form of story and adds some interesting side paths on the trail.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, I find that too.
Yeah, I tend to have little twists in my poems.
Yeah.
I would love to share a really short piece with you that exemplifies all of that. It's called Babel. After the great flood dried, a certain mighty man swore revenge against the heavens, built a spiraling tower, destination, face of God. Mantis scrambles up the highest flower. Man-made rain has fallen more than 40 days. He eagerly mounts my hand, scales my arm, determined to likewise take revenge. I name him Nimrod.
Very good.
And for me, narrative poetry is either telling a direct story or making connections to other events, to history, to people. And the poems that I tend to enjoy the most are those where there's a creative connection, a leap that I might not have found for myself. And the poems that I write that people tend to enjoy the most are the ones who have those leaps of, I never thought of pairing that with that.
Exactly.
I think the whole thing about, I agree with what both of you said, but also the thing about sound and music and, you know, all the, I mean, the same kind of techniques that I think are used in a lyric poem, metaphor and assonance and, you know, alliteration, all those things, I think we all try to use in our narrative poetry as well.
I think what we are looking for when we're reading, whatever it is surprises. We would like to be surprised. I think when that happens, we pause for a moment and then happily go into the new direction.
Yeah.
I think she froze there for a second. But we'll be surprised at what happens. But,
I think for me,
yeah,
Jim
and
talked
also
about,
to me, it's like if there's a story I want to write about, there's a reason I want to write about it. You know, it's not just you know, when I was a teacher with kids, we would try to teach them not to just write a bed-to-bed story. You know, I woke up in the morning and then I brushed my teeth and then I went here and then I did that, you know, and but to say, well, where's the heat of the story? Where's the part that you really want to talk about and why is that important to you, you know? And so if something, I do write mostly narrative poetry, but when it comes up, it's usually because there's some kernel of something in there, and that's what I'm going to try to build the poem around, you know. So the story is more so you understand all of that.
I think it's a lot of a good poem needs to be enjoyed and also needs to create a sense of curiosity. I think Jim used the word enjoy. We enjoy a poem. And sometimes I find that abstract poems, like abstract art, it's very difficult to really enjoy them and find meaning in them. I remember my father was an art critic and he would take me to an exhibition and there'd be all these splashes of paint and he'd be standing there taking notes because he was writing for the Times of India. He was writing a column. And I would say, what do you see in this, Daddy? I don't see anything in it. And I think in a narrative poem, you are telling this interesting story. Hopefully it's interesting and enjoyable, like the ones we've heard this evening. And I hope no one has an MFA in this group, because some of the poems I find are just after 2 lines or 3 lines, I'm like, oh my goodness, what are they trying to say? Forget it. I'm going to the next poem, or I'm going to write another poem of my own. So enjoyment and curiosity to me, and narrative poems, all of the ones that were read today, I'm intrigued. I want to know, where do you come from? What are you talking about? Your cat or the dog, or the mental illness poem, which was very, very powerful because I can relate to it with someone in my family. So that for me is the difference between abstract. I mean, I'm not saying you can't write lyrical, and you do. You have that quality of lyricism, but this is what I find the enjoyment.
The other thing is, of course, that we're all different.
Yes.
And each one of us reacts to different things in a different way. And I always call it, when you see something or you read something, you read a book, for example, and you have a second moment of creation, because the writer had a certain idea about his people in his book, the people who people his book, and the situations and the landscape. And as a reader, you're creating your own, because you're bringing your own feelings and thoughts and images to the book. And you have 20,000 books sold, so you have 20,000 different secondary moments of creation, where people have interpreted your book their own way. And that can be positive, that can be negative. And then suddenly somebody makes a film. Yeah. And you say, that has nothing to do with the book I read. Well, no, it doesn't, because it's the image that the director created. It's the secondary moment of creation that the director had. And sometimes it coincides, and sometimes it doesn't.
Rosemary, your sound went off there.
I'm seeing and hearing you just.
It doesn't look like you're muted, but your sound went away. Try saying something.
Yeah, I hear her perfectly as well.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's with your other people's connections.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hear her fine.
Sorry.
I find it amazing that people in this day and age still expect a movie to follow the plot of a book exactly line for line.
Yeah.
How can you expect that?
Yeah, a movie is a specific, I guess you could say it's a specific genre that has its conventions.
And it has limitations. In spite of everything, it does have limitations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's an adaptation of the poem or the book or the whatever, the novel.
Mm.
We run through the same problem.
When you disagree with that, what you're essentially saying is what you saw doesn't match what I saw, which doesn't match what someone else saw. Okay, so it doesn't match. Sit back and enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's like storytelling. I have done a little bit of storytelling when I was a librarian, but also I would go to storytelling events, and I had friends who were professional storytellers, and they always say you make the story your own. And if you listen to storytellers, they can tell the same, different storytellers can tell the same story, but they make it their own. They put their own spin on it. And when a book is made into a play or to a movie, it's like telling that story again, and a different spin from that storyteller is making it their own.
Well, you should have told my children that, because when I read stories for them, or I told them stories, I had to be word perfect. It had to be repeated. I had to make the same sound at the same place at the same time, because otherwise it didn't count. And
that's a totally different comfort. But if you can, but if you are familiar with the art of storytelling, you will see
I'm
that
joking. I'm joking because they drove me nuts. Because
that was the way when I told stories to my little brother. You had to say the same. I think it gives them a sense of safety and continuity. But when you grow up, and you're an adult telling stories to other adults, it's a whole different scenario.
I kind of really like it when I write a poem and I hear how different people take it, that like people get things from it that I never even thought about or intended or whatever. And I mean, it's not completely, totally disconnected, but to me, I mean, I do believe that once you write the poem, it's out there and it's belongs to the readers, and it's just very interesting. I mean, I think I value poems where people are going to have different responses to it because of their own personal situations and lives and stuff like that. And it's something else I've learned about publishing is that sometimes, it's helped me depersonalize that because editors are individual readers too, and so something that one editor likes,
the other one doesn't.
The other one doesn't, but it doesn't really have much to do with, was it a good poem? It has to do with how that hit that person, at that particular moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's funny how Robert Frost's poem, when you're a teacher, you're teaching it so many times, and those the poem "The Road Not Taken" and the last two lines, he took the road less taken, and that has made all the difference. And the students are on and on about it. What kind of difference did it make, etc., etc. And recently, a little while ago, I read in a Poetry Foundation, Robert Frost actually wrote this poem as a joke. So here we are, taking it all so seriously. And it goes with what Joanne was saying about the interpretation, how it's different for different readers. And he was just making a joke and saying something to his friend. And here's this whole road, and I'm always thinking of the two paths that diverge. Which one did I take, So yeah, that's one thing. And the other thing is about contests and awards. People win contests and win awards, and there are so many poets who are so wonderful and so great, but they might have submitted, but then it's again a personal reaction to those particular poems. Somebody once wrote, that poem's all rubbish, and I wrote such a wonderful poem and I didn't win an award. So, I mean, it's just a very personal reaction and interpretation, and how you feel, how it makes you feel, really. That's what I think.
Anyway, I have to leave. I have to go back to Lima. And it was wonderful, and thank you all. And I'm so glad I see all your faces and see you talking and moving and real. You're not just something on a page. So I'm very happy. And Sharon, thank you for doing this. This is it's a wonderful moment. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you. It was lovely. It was lovely. Thank you.
So should we close? Does it did people, I think that we've done a good job and appreciate
Excellent.
it.
Thank you for hosting, Joanne.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care. Good night, everybody.
Good
Good night.
Night.